So the Parsha begins, Hashem spoke to Moshe in the wilderness of Sinai in the tent of meeting on the first of the second month, in the second year after the exodus from the land of Egypt, saying. So once again, he's speaking in the wilderness of Sinai, that's in the wilderness next to Mount Sinai, in the tent of meeting, which once the tent of meeting, the tabernacle was built, that's where Moshe heard Hashem speaking to him for the rest of his life. On the first of the second month, in the second year after the exodus from the land of Egypt, saying. So the first of the second month would be the month of Iyar, which is we're holding a little bit after that in the year, but this is about 6 months after Yom Kippur. So close to 7 months after Yom Kippur when they started, or which was a little bit before they started building the tabernacle. So we're holding, we had a little bit of skipping in history right now. We're holding about 7 months later than the last time we know we were holding. But it begins in verse 2, take a census of the entire assembly of the children of Israel according to their families, according to their father's household, by the number of names, every male according to their head count. From 20 years of age and up, everyone who goes out to the legion in Israel, you shall count them according to their legions, you and Aaron, and with you shall be one man from each tribe, a man who is a leader of his father's household. So there's a mitzvah for them to count the Jewish people. Remember, this isn't the first count that we've run into. We actually had one pretty recently in Parsha Kisisa, that's why I was mentioning Yom Kippur, Parsha Kisisa. There, we were commanded to count the Jewish people. Every Jew was commanded to give a half a shekel, or every Jew, I should say, from the ages of 20 and up, was commanded to give half a shekel, and they counted up all those half shekels to figure out how many people there were. And interesting, and that was, like I said, about 7 months earlier than this counting. And interestingly, the counts are exactly equal. Maybe I'll talk about, but the counts were exactly equal, about 7 months apart. And there, like I said, everyone gave half a shekel. Here, that's not mentioned explicitly. The Ramban says that it goes without saying. Of course, that's what they did. Everyone gave half a shekel. But others disagree. The Klayaka brings that there are others who disagree and said it was only in that first counting that they needed to give a half a shekel for the counting, but otherwise they could count in a normal way. And he explains it as follows. He says that in the reason why they have to give the half shekel, is it's expressed in Parshas Kisisa, is kofar nafsho. It's an atonement for the soul. And that's because counting people is a dangerous thing. Because when you're counting, you're inviting scrutiny. Not only are you inviting scrutiny, you're inviting an ayin hara, an evil eye, which we've spoken about before in this class, that an evil eye is the idea that you're causing someone else to look at a person with a question of why does that person have that? So, for example, if someone parades their children out in public, like cute kids, it might cause some other people pain. That like their kids, they don't have children, or maybe their children don't look like that. And just causing other people pain is a very dangerous thing, because that invites judgment. That's that if we cause people to question why do they have that, so we're inviting to go before God and say, do they deserve that or not? Which is, we try to avoid that kind of scrutiny from God. So we try to avoid an ayin hara, evil eye. If we're counting the Jews, we're coming out with a number. This is how many there are. So that's also inviting that kind of scrutiny. Look how many Jews there are. We're inviting scrutiny. Should each person exist? Does this person deserve to be here? Does this person deserve to be here? Each person has their number. There's him and him and him and him. And therefore, it's something we avoid, and we need that atonement of the soul. We give the charity, that half shekel, and that half shekel allows us to survive the counting. But the Klayaka says that that's really only necessary the first time you do the counting. And he expresses it with a mashal, with a comparison to rich people and poor people, that if you have a rich person who has lots of money, people accept that. They know that, a rich person has a lot of money and they have a nice house and a nice car. That doesn't necessarily invoke like major jealousy or major talk. Like you see that millionaire, he has a big house, he has a nice car. That's what people expect. That's their expectations. Whereas if you have a poor person, one of the folks, like one of the guys who strikes it rich and make lots of money, that invokes envy. Then it's like, who does he think he is? That if it's the rich person has money, it's of course he does. If you have, I think, the nouveau riche, what are they called in French? My Canadians can help me with that. The nouveau riche, the new rich people.
Rich.
Yeah, the new rich, the people who like all of a sudden who didn't have money, now they have money. So people look at them.
I think it's riche, nouveau riche.
Nouveau riche?
Yeah,
okay.
right.
Yeah, I don't think there's an A at the end of that.
Oh, yeah. Were you ever posted in France?
No, it never was.
Okay. So a new rich person. So people look at them like, well, who do they think they are? Why are they getting that nice house? They were one of us. So when they go through that change, that's really what invites the Ayin Hara. That's what invites people having problems with them. But once they already went through that, once we were already counted, our numbers were established. So another counting isn't dangerous. And he says that's why a lot of the commentaries discuss here another incident from our history. And this is from the end of the book of Shmuel. It discusses King David asked his officers to count the Jewish people. And Yoav tried to discourage him. He said that this isn't the why. Why should we count? What does it matter how many people we have? We should have even more and more and more. But David insisted. And then David insisted, and they did the census, and immediately he recognized that he shouldn't have done that. Once it was done, he recognized he shouldn't have done it, and he started repenting. And Hashem sent a prophet and told him that you have three choices for punishment. One is that there's going to be war. I believe I could be off with this. I don't have it in front of me. One is that there's going to be a famine, and one is that there's going to be a plague. And he said that I want to throw myself. We actually say this verse in Tachanun not every day, but we say this verse in the Tachanun as an introduction. He says, "I'd rather put myself in the hands of God than throw myself in the hands of man." So he asked for the plague, and that's because we know that disease could strike anyone. You have billionaires in New York passing away from the coronavirus. It could hit everybody equally. Everybody's vulnerable. Whereas hunger, the rich could sometimes buy their way out of it. And when it comes to war as well, that the mighty fight, and it's usually the what is it? The senator's son gets spared, and the poor guy gets sent to battle. And so war is not really an equal opportunity killer. And additionally, war, you're in the hands of man in a sense, that it's people trying to kill the person. Whereas disease is straight from Hashem, is straight from God. So David's saying, I'd rather have the plague, and that way at least we're at the mercy of God rather than being at the mercy of man. So he asked for the plague. There was a terrible plague, and he survived. But that was his punishment for counting the Jewish people. So they asked, what was he thinking? So it's expressed explicitly that this was a punishment. The Jewish people deserved a punishment already, and because of that, that caused him to forget. That caused him to make this mistake.
Rabbi.
Yes.
Wasn't that plague supposed to last a month or 3 months, and it only lasted a day and a half?
I think it says 3 days.
3 days. 3 days.
Yeah.
And it only lasted
maybe. I don't remember. I don't have it in front of me, and this isn't the main topic of the class, so I'm not gonna look it up. But I don't remember. Okay. So what was his mistake? And the commentaries all discuss it here. And the Ramban says that of course he would have used money the same way the Ramban says, the same way that they used the half shekel in Kisisa, they used a half shekel here, and it just goes without saying. And he used a half shekel. The Kli Yakar says that he didn't need a half shekel the same way we don't need it here. The problem was that he counted them unnecessarily. That here it was necessarily. We were commanded by Hashem to count the Jewish people. Nowadays they're doing the census. That's the U.S. government has the law every 10 years. You got to count all the people in the United States. David HaMelech, King David did it, he didn't really have a good reason for doing it. There was no commandment from God to count the Jewish people, and that's why when we're doing it without any good reason, that's also wrong. Okay, but it does begin here. When it says take the census, the Hebrew, and this is Pasuk Beis verse 2, is Se'u es Rosh. Literally means raise the heads. So Rashi says that this could be interpreted in two ways. It could mean raise the head, could mean to raise up, to make them, to make them holy, or it could mean to cut off the head. And once again, counting is dangerous, and if we deserve it, we're raised up by it. If we don't, off with the head. But additionally, I think I saw expressed in a sefer that counting something is something we do with something important. That, and this is definitely true by something that's sold. That if you buy something, you could buy things in different ways. You could buy something by volume. You buy by the ounce, by the gallon, or by the bushel. Some things you buy by weight. You buy by the pound. Something, but there are things that are really important. You buy by the number. You buy 10 of these and 3 of these, just by giving each one its own individual significance by buying by the number, instead of that its weight is absorbed by all the others. You're giving it significance by buying it by the number. And the Torah, or in halacha, that has major significance when something is sold by the number or counted by the number. That has significance that usually something could become nullified by a majority. If you have dry things, let's say something not kosher got mixed in with kosher things. So if it's dry, usually a majority may be enough to nullify it. It's considered as if it's not there. Let's say you have, let's say you have a cholent, a meat cholent, and some milk fell out, and a few drops of milk fell into the cholent. So milk and meat together is not kosher. But if you have 60 times in the mixture more than 60 times the amount of the milk, let's say, that fell in, then the mixture is kosher. Then it's fine. That's called bittul. It's nullified. So, but you could only nullify something that's sold or counted by weight or by volume. Something that's counted by number cannot be nullified. It's just something that's counted by numbers. Like, let's say eggs, maybe. Eggs might be something you sell by the dozen. You don't sell eggs by weight or by volume. It's sold by number. So that may be something that it's just the fact that you counted gives each thing a significance, so it cannot be nullified. And I think it's the can't remember who it is, says, the Beis Yitzchak, I think, says that that's true about the Jewish people as well. That the Jewish people we're a small nation, and we're mixed into all the nations of the world, and we're mixed in so well, you may think that we'll be nullified, that we'll be so overcome by numbers that we'll just cease to exist and be completely lost amongst the nations of the world. And here Hashem's counting us. He's raising up our heads, in a sense. He's counting us, saying, you have this significance, and that significance cannot be nullified, cannot be covered up, cannot be overwhelmed by number. Okay, and we are counted. So in verse 5, these are the names of the men who shall stand with you, from Reuven, Elitzur, son of Shteor, and it enumerates the people who will help him count the Jewish people. And skipping to page 729, verse 18, they gathered together the entire assembly on the first of the second month, and they established their genealogy according to their families, according to their father's household, by number of the names from 20 years of age and up, according to their head counts, as Hashem had commanded Moshe. He counted them in the wilderness of Sinai. The Ramban points out an incredible thing. We said that the commandment, Moshe was commanded on the first of the second month. In verse 18, they gathered together the entire assembly on the first of the second month. That same day, from the same day Moshe was commanded, they already had their meeting. They already got all the people together that they needed and had their meeting, their plan of attack, that let's do this thing. And it's an amazing thing, because usually when we have something we need to do, especially if it's a group that's going to be involved, so you first get together, you have your meeting about, like, when should we talk about it? Then a month later, you talk about it and decide to make plans, and then everything takes time. You have all these meetings about talking. Here, they got together. That same day they were commanded, they were already getting to work. Okay, and I mentioned one reason why this counting was necessary was just to show the significance of the Jewish people. Another reason given, and this is by the Klayakar, and going along with that, that's showing the significance, is that this is somewhat a midrashic or Kabbalistic idea that the Jewish people, the Shekhinah, the divine presence, only rests on the Jewish people when there are 22,000 of us. And that comes from what we say when we bring the Torah back to the Ark, and this is right before we sing, so we say, Uvnucha Yomar, when it rests, they said, Shuva Rivavas Alpha Yisrael, that returned the 10,000s of Israel. So there's plural 10,000s and plural thousands, that's 22,000. And we'll see that in this counting, the smallest tribe, the tribe of Levi, had 22,000, or a little more really, 22,300. And so even the smallest of the tribes were able to have the divine presence rest on them. Additionally, the Ramban expresses a reason for this counting is that they had just received the Torah at Mount Sinai, that were in the desert, they're getting ready to travel in the desert, and originally the plan was for them to go straight to the land of Israel at this point. And they took a detour for about 39 years because of the sin of the spies, but that hadn't happened yet. So the plan really was for them to go straight to the land of Canaan and conquer. So they did a counting, as it says, according to their legions, because they had to see who the fighting men were and what units they would be assigned to, etc. Okay, then it gives the counting. Interesting. Okay, so it gives the counting. If you look at the numbers by Ruvain, verse 20, these are the sons of Ruvain. The account for the tribe of Ruvain, this is verse 21 on page 729, 46,500. For Shimon, in verse 23, 59,300. And Gad, on verse 25, 45,650. So you see basically where the numbers are going. That it's 46, 45, 53, 59. It's, between 40 and 60,000. Some are bigger, some are smaller. If you look in verse 27, the tribe of Yehuda, their count for the tribe of Yehuda is 74,600. That's a big tribe. And etc. This is about where the range is. So, and I'll just skip to the end in verse 44. And page 731, verse 44, these are the countings that Moshe and Aaron, the leaders of Israel, counted. 12 men, one man for his father's household were they. These were all the countings of the children of Israel according to their father's household from 20 years of age and up. Everyone who goes out in the legion of Israel, all their countings were 603,550. Additionally, another interesting thing, if you look at those numbers that I quoted, they were all multiples of 10. And here also there are multiples of 10. And I think someone asked me in the past that, did that really happen? Every tribe happened to have a multiple of 10 at that point. So I saw that Rabbeinu Bachya mentions it, and he says that that Moshe was assisted in the counting by the leaders. It says the leaders of tens, the leaders by the leaders, and the Jewish people were assigned leaders. Every group had a leader from 10 to leaders of thousands, leaders of hundreds, leaders of tens. It was you have the division leader, then you have the brigade leader. I couldn't be confusing those. Then you have the Frank. What's below that? You have the
battalion is right below brigade. A brigade contains about 4 or 5 battalions.
Battalions, and then you have the platoon leaders and the squad leaders, whatever it is.
Right. You have
the Jewish people,
4 companies in a battalion and 3 or 4 platoons in a company.
Okay, thank you. So you have people who are leaders of bigger groups, and then each subdivision has a smaller group that is being led. So this is true also about the Jewish people, that they had leaders of thousands, leaders of hundreds, and leaders of tens. But the smallest subdivision they had were leaders of tens. So so those were the ones who assisted in the count. So they helped count their own people. So after that, I guess the people who, until there was another group of 10 in each tribe, they weren't assigned a leader yet, and those people were not counted. So that's why the rounding is always, it's rounded by tens. Okay, now in verse 47 it states, the Levites according to their father's tribe were not counted among them. So Moshe did not count the Leviim. And it says later that was by the command of Hashem. It's not explicit where Moshe was commanded that. So some commentaries say that Moshe understood this on his own, because when it said the leaders of the tribes that should help out with the counting, it did not mention the leader of the tribe of Levi. So Moshe understood that they wouldn't be counting the Levites amongst the rest of the Jewish people. Others understand that, this might be the Ramban, says that they counted ba'osos based on signs. And this is how the golem, the formations were as well, which we'll see. And that was based on how the sons of Jacob carried his coffin. That's how they were arranged around the Mishkan, around the tabernacle. And Levi did not participate in the carrying of Yaakov's coffin. He said that he doesn't want Levi to carry his coffin because he's going to carry the Ark of the Covenant, and he shouldn't be carrying his funeral bier. So therefore he understood, so Moshe did not count him amongst the other Jews. And the reason why he wasn't supposed to count them, he was right, and one of the reasons given why Levi wasn't counted with the others is because the others tribes were destined to not enter the land of Canaan. They were not going to enter the land of Canaan. They were going to die in the desert. And if Levi was part of the group, if he was counted amongst them, he would be part of that group, and he would be subject to that group punishment, and he wouldn't enter the men of Levi would not enter the land of Canaan as well. So they were counted separate, so that way they would be able to be in their own group, and where this group was punished, they wouldn't be. Okay, so now in verse 48, Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, but you shall not count the tribe of Levi, you shall not take a census of them among the children of Israel. You shall appoint the Levites over the tabernacle of testimony, over its utensils, everything that belongs to it. They shall carry the tabernacle and all its utensils, they shall minister to it, and they shall encamp around the tabernacle. When the tabernacle journeys, the Levites shall take it down, and when the tabernacle encamps, the Levites shall erect it, and an alien who approaches shall die. An alien being a non-Levite who comes close to and comes in contact with the vessels or the parts of the tabernacle while it was disassembled is subject to death, a heavenly death penalty. They're not killed in court. Okay, and this as well is expressed in the Gemara and by the Rambam as someone who goes in without any purpose, just like someone who's just wandering in on his own without any purpose being there. If it's a non-Levi, he is once again not put to death by court, but it's saying that there will be a heavenly punishment of death. Okay, and now in verse 52, which is really this is the top of page 733. Verse 52, this is the big topic of the Parsha, is the children of Israel shall encamp every man in his camp and every man in his banner according to their legions. The Levites shall encamp around the tabernacle of the testimony so that there shall be no wrath upon the assembly of the children of Israel. The Levites were there as a buffer to protect the Jews from getting too close. And the Levites shall safeguard the watch of the tabernacle of testimony. The children of Israel did everything that Hashem commanded Moshe, so they did. And then it continues, it goes on, and I'll just read the first few verses here in chapter 2, page 733. Hashem spoke to Moshe and Aaron, saying, the children of Israel shall encamp each man by his banner according to the insignias of their father's household. At a distance surrounding the tent of meeting shall they encamp. And then it gives the order of encampment. This is called the masos, or the degalim, the flags, the formations, that they had three tribes. The tribe Levi surrounded the tabernacle, and then they had three tribes on each side, so they had a total of 12, including Ephraim and Manasseh, surrounding the Levites, surrounding the tabernacle. And this week's the Parsha gives a tremendous amount of space to this enumerating and explaining how exactly they were encamped, where they were positioned, who was positioned with whom. And our sages also give a tremendous significance to this, to the point that there's a medrash that says about Shir Hashirim, the Song of Songs composed by King Solomon, that there's a verse that says, Shuvi, Shuvi HaShulamis, that return the Shulamis, return and will gaze at you. And it ends off that what can the Shulamis see? Kimcholas HaMachanaim, like the circles of the camps. And our sages say that that's referring to two things. It's referring to the camps that we saw at the giving of the Torah, that when the Torah was given, the Jewish people saw the divine presence descending onto Mount Sinai, and they saw the divine presence was surrounded by this formation of angels in a similar way to how they were commanded to surround the tabernacle in the desert and in these encampments. And when they saw that, they asked God if only we could have a similar situation, and that's how they got this mitzvah of the encampments. But our sages interpret also to refer to these encampments themselves. And what they're expressing there, and they say that that verse is a metaphor for the nations of the world trying to tempt the Jewish people, that when they say, return, Shuvi, Shuvi HaShulamis, return, O Shulamis, return so we could gaze at you, that's the nations of the world trying to seduce the Jewish people to assimilate. And the Jewish people's response is, what can we see with you? What can you offer to people who experience the circles, the circles of these encampments? That's the answer to the answer to the nations of the world who want us to assimilate is, we had these encampments in the desert. So obviously our sages are giving a tremendous significance to them. So I saw explained is that I've mentioned this over and over really in this class, is that the fact that there were 12 tribes is not just that Yaakov was a Jew and all his descendants are Jews, and he happened to have 12 sons, so there are 12 tribes. There's a significance to each of the 12 tribes. That's the Jews are subdivided into 12 parts, and each one has its own culture, its own personality, and its own part to play in the world. And that's true about the tribes, and it's true about each family, and it's true about each individual. That each individual has their own significance and their own importance and their own job to play in the Jewish, as part of the Jewish people, and really as in the plan of the universe. And it's something that only we could do and nobody else. And that's why we're created, is because we have a job that only our unique talents and personality could accomplish. And the same way, like with an army, where they have these formations, they have these marches. That's something that builds teamwork, and it builds reliance on everyone else. That if one person fails, then the whole thing messes up. So with us as well, when we're put into these formations, it's showing everyone's put in their place. Reuven is assigned this spot, and that spot that they're assigned is on this side of the tabernacle, and it's next to the tribe of Shimon. And so every person is given their place and their neighbor, and that all has meaning, and it all shows them what is their role in the Jewish people and what's their role in the universe. And that's a tremendous gift that we had, that we were shown that we were shown purpose. We were shown that we each have our own unique contributions to give that only we could give. And that's our answer to the nations of the world. The nations of the world want us to assimilate. We say we were shown that we have purpose here. We can't assimilate with you. We're part of this group that needs us. We're part of this group that has so much to give, and we're a necessary part of that. So we can't leave. And I saw from Rav Moshe Sternbuch, he quotes something from a beautiful thought from Meir Shapiro. But he says, first of all, that in that verse, it mentions the circles, mecholas hamachanaim, are the circles of the camps. And the unique property of a circle, which is really the definition of a circle, mathematical definition of a circle, is that every part of the line or every part of the circle is equal distant from the central point. And that's what a circle is. A circle is something where you have a line that every part of the line is equidistant from the center. And as Jews, we surround the Shekhinah, we surround the divine presence, and that's where we're all pointing, that's where we're all facing. and and there are circles. There are many different types of Jews. There are many different groups with their own customs, but we're all pointing at the central location. We're all facing towards the Mishkan, towards the tabernacle, towards the holy. And he quotes from Meir Shapiro, this is a really beautiful thought, is that there's subdivisions, but there are primarily two different sidders, which have some differences, mostly in the order and some slight differences in the words. There's what we call Nusach Ashkenaz, which is what we do in Bnei Brit Jacob, the Ashkenazic version of the siddur. And then there's Nusach Sfard, which you would think would be the Sephardic one, but it's actually mostly adopted by Hasidim, and who follow the Arizal, who follow a Kabbalistic band, and they have a different version of the siddur. And one of the big differences is that where we say we begin the Psukei D'Zimra, the songs of praise before the blessings of Shema, we start with Baruch She'amar, that blessed is he who said and the world's created, and then we do Hodu. Whereas the Hasidim start with Hodu and then they do Baruch She'amar. So they switch the order of that beginning. But he says, but we all come together by Yehi Chavod Hashem La'olam, that may the honor of Hashem be eternal. So whereas we start in different places, we come together at we come together raising the honor of Hashem. And that's what the Jewish people are about, that we might be different, we might observe differently, we have different customs, but ultimately we're all aiming to the same place, and we're all, as long as we're all aiming towards the honor of heaven, so we're all doing something right. And that's what the Galim, what these encampments are about. Again, the Ramban says about the significance of the encampments. I'll just go quickly through them. So where am I? In verse 3 on page 733, those who encamp to the front at the east shall be the banner of the camp of Yehuda according to their legions. The leader of the children of Yehuda is Nachshon son Amminadab, and his legion and count are 74,600. This is the count of the children of Yehuda. And then it says those encamping near him are the tribe of Yisachar, and in verse 7, the tribe of Zevulun. So on the east side, the front side at the east side of the tabernacle are Yehuda, Yisachar, and Zevulun. This was a group that did very well, and I think Rashi expresses that it shows a concept from the Mishnah of Oila Rasha Oila Shcheno. Tov l'tzadik, tov l'shcheno, that it's good for the righteous and it's good for his neighbor, meaning that it's good to stick around righteous people. And that is illustrated by this group, Yehuda, Yisachar, and Zevulun, being on the east, and the Levim who were on the east side of the tabernacle were Moshe and Aaron and his sons. So this group of tribes were close to Moshe and Aaron, and they did very well for themselves. That Yehuda traditionally were the kings, and they were also teachers of Torah, as Yaakov expressed his blessing. Mechokek mibein raglav, that the law comes out from Yehuda as well. The Torah law comes from Yehuda, that they make halachic decisions. And Yisachar is also traditionally the great Torah scholars coming from the tribe of Yisachar. And from Zevulun came the very wealthy supporters of Torah, so the supporters of the Torah scholars. So they did very well. Whereas on the next one, on page 735, verse 10, the banner of the camp of Reuven shall be to the south according to their legions, and the leader of the children of Reuven is Elitzur, son of Shdeor. Then it says in verse 12, those encamping near him are the tribe of Shimon, and in verse 14, in the tribe of Gad. Now, Reuven and Shimon, maybe to a lesser extent, got hurt by the opposite concept of woe is to the wicked and woe is to their neighbor, meaning that it's a bad idea to hang out around wicked people, because the family of Kahas was on the south side of the Mishkan of the tabernacle, one of the members of the tribe of Kahas being Korach. And that's how Korach had access to the tribe of Reuven, because they were encamped near each other. And that's why many of the followers of Korach who ended up being destroyed were from the tribe of Reuven. Okay, now the encampment to the west. In verse 18, the banner of the camp of Ephraim, according to the leaders, should be the west. The leader of Ephraim is Elishama son of Ammihud. And in verse 20, those encamping near him are the tribe of Manasseh, and in verse 22, on the tribe of Benjamin. So it's interesting. So to the west was Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin, which are the sons of Rachel. So all the sons of Rachel, those dads, Yosef and Benjamin, the sons of Rachel, all camped together. Beautiful thing, the families stayed together. And in verse 25, is the banner of the camp of Dan shall be to the north. It's in verse 27, those encamping near him, the tribes of Asher. And in verse 29, the tribe of Naphtali. So that is the formation, and the commentaries all explain this based on Kabbalah, and that there's a significance to each tribe's placement, why they're placed with each other, and why they're placed on the direction that they're placed, mostly based on the Merkava, based on the heavenly formation, the setup of the heavenly court as seen by the prophecies of Yechezkel, Ezekiel, and Yeshaya. They explain these formations. They're interesting. The Rabbeinu Bachya starts off saying that the reason should be hidden, and it's something that I can't say, and then he goes and says it. So it's something that you have some very interesting commentaries there. Okay, so now in verse 32, on page 737, these are the countings of the children of Israel according to their fathers' households. All the countings of the camps according to their legions, 603,550. And like I mentioned, that's the exact same number that they got from the counting that took place a short time after Yom Kippur when they gave the half shekels. Okay, in verse 34, the children of Israel did everything that Hashem had commanded Moshe, so they encamped according to their banners, so they journeyed every man according to his family by his father's household. Now, in chapter 3 on page 737, now we're going to go into the Levim, the Levites. These are the offspring of Aaron and Moshe on the day Hashem spoke with Moshe at Mount Sinai. These are the names of the sons of Aaron. The firstborn was Nadav and Avihu, Elazar and Isamar. These were the names of the sons of Aaron, the anointed Kohanim whom he inaugurated to minister. Nadav and Avihu died before Hashem when they offered an alien fire before Hashem in the wilderness of Sinai, and they had no children. But Elazar and Isamar ministered during the lifetime of Aaron, their father. So there are a few interesting things about this. First of all, we said it begins, these are the offspring of Aaron and Moshe. But it doesn't mention any sons of Moshe, just the offspring of Aaron. So Rashi says that that Moshe taught them Torah, and this is to teach you that when he teaches Torah, it's as if they father them, it's as if they give birth to them. So they're considered Moshe's sons as well because he taught them Torah. Many commentaries ask that why is it that Nadav and Avihu are mentioned? If it's telling us they're descendants, Nadav and Avihu had died already without children, so why mention them at all? They're not around anymore to be descendants. And it mentions why they died and that they died without children. Why is that all mentioned? So there are others. I think the Ramban even mentions this. He hints at this elsewhere. Is that this is a Kabbalistic idea. This Parsha is full of Kabbalah, so I could say something. But there's a Kabbalistic idea of Yibum, of levirate marriage, that when one performs the mitzvah of levirate marriage, it's considered so any child that they had, the Torah says is Nikra al-Shemam, it's called after their name. There's actually a very foundational concept to Shavuos in the Book of Ruth as well, that the child that the person who performs levirate marriage, that's where a man dies without children, there's a mitzvah on his brother to marry the wife, and it says the child that he has will be called after his name. And I think if it's not the Gemara, it's the early commentaries speak out that this doesn't mean that they call the child the same name as the deceased, because every yibum, every example of levirate marriage we see in the Torah, they do not call him the same name. For example, Yehuda did a version of levirate marriage, and for his son, this is before the giving of the Torah, and does not call the son the same name as his son who died. In the Book of Ruth, which is traditionally read on Shavuos, so Boaz does a levirate marriage for Machlon, for a son of Elimelech, for the wife, I should say, for Ruth, who was married to a son of Elimelech. So Boaz does Yibum and does not name the baby Machlon, he names him Oved. So he gives him a different name than the name of the deceased. So the Torah can't mean that you give him the same name. And the Ramban says what it means is that he actually gets the soul of the deceased. And the Malbim speaks this out as well, that the soul of the deceased is hanging around. If he leaves the world without leaving anything behind, without leaving any descendants behind, so the soul is not at rest, and it hangs out in the world. And that's what the mitzvah of Yibum is about, is that the child that's born, he has another chance really in the world, and he comes back, and that child is actually the soul of the deceased in a new body. And it's almost like a direct reincarnation. And that's why this is expressed here, because presumably Elazar and Isamar would have done Yibum, would have done levirate marriage with the wives of their brothers, Nadav and Avihu. And that's why it says that Nadav and Avihu died before Hashem, and they had no children, but Elazar and Isamar ministered during the lifetime of Aaron, their father, meaning that Elazar and Isamar took over their jobs in a sense, married them, and their children are considered as if they're their children. The Kli Yakar says a different idea, though. And he says that this is answering two questions. It's answering, first of all, why they're mentioned, and why it says that Moshe, it says, these are the descendants of Aaron and Moshe, but only since Aaron's and not Moshe's. And that is that because Aaron participated in the sin of the golden calf, he was involved in that. So Hashem wanted to destroy Aaron. And Moshe prayed for him. And destruction in the Torah usually implies that they're completely erased, that their lineage is erased. There's no children. So Moshe prayed for Aaron, and his prayers helped halfway. They saved two of his sons, meaning two of his sons died and two of his sons were saved. And because Moshe prayed, these sons survived only through the prayers of Moshe, so that's why they're considered like his sons. That they're only there because of him, because of his prayers. Aaron has these sons still following him, so they're alive. That's why it mentions these are the offspring of Moshe and of Aaron and Moshe. And once again, first was Nadav, Avihu, Elazar, and Isamar, and Nadav and Avihu died, but Elazar and Isamar ministered during the lifetime of Aaron, their father, and that was only through Moshe. So they're considered as if they're descendants of Moshe. Okay. So now, it says in verse 5, Hashem spoke to Moshe, saying, bring near the tribe of Levi, have it stand before Aaron the Kohen, and they shall serve him. They shall safeguard the charge and the charge of the entire assembly before the tent of meeting. To perform the service of the tabernacle, they shall safeguard all the utensils of the tent of meeting, and the charge of the children of Israel to perform, on page 739, the service of the tabernacle. And it continues with the job of the Levites a little bit. That's more at the end of the Parsha. But this is really the first time that the Levim, the Levites, were officially appointed as Levim. Until this point, it was really the firstborns were the ones who were charged with doing the service. And they were the holy people, the firstborn male, well, whatever family had a firstborn male, they would be the ones who would do the service in the tabernacle. And even though the Kohanim were appointed as the Kohanim, the Leviim weren't really appointed as the Leviim. So taking care of the vessels and carrying the tabernacle would have been done by the firstborns. Because the firstborns, sinned with the sin of the golden calf, whereas no Levi did, therefore the Leviim were chosen to be the holy tribe. Additionally, we'll see the Levites are by far the smallest of the tribes. And the same way the Jewish people, being one of the smallest of the nations, were chosen by Hashem, the Leviim, being one of the smallest of the tribes of Israel, were also especially chosen by Hashem. It's hard to imagine in Savannah, but the Leviim really were the smallest of the tribes. And like I said, I've been at a minyan in Savannah. They made a later minyan. So I think there were like 12 of us. And during the reading of the Torah, they had to look around, are there any Yisraels? Are there any Yisraels? And they ended up, I don't remember what we did, but we were short a Yisrael. We had too many Levis and not enough Yisraels. I think we had 9 and 3. 9 Levis and 3 Yisraels. So it's hard to imagine, but the Leviim were the smallest of the tribes by far. Okay, and so continuing on, in verse 11, it's explicit that they are replacing the firstborns. Hashem spoke to Moshe, saying, behold, I have taken the Levites from among the children of Israel in place of every firstborn, the first issue of every womb among the children of Israel, and the Levites shall be mine. For every firstborn is mine on the day I struck down every firstborn in the land of Egypt. I sanctified every firstborn in Israel for myself. From man to beast, they shall be mine. I am Hashem. And then it mentions the census of the Levites. So in verse 14, Hashem spoke to Moshe in the wilderness of Sinai, saying, count the sons of Levi according to their father's household, according to their families. Every male from 1 month of age and up shall you count them. Moshe counted them according to the word of Hashem as he had been commanded. And this is interesting, whereas the children of Israel were counted from the age of 20 and up. And there's a medrash that says 20 to 60, but it's very hard to see that in the verses. And from a lot of the commentaries, it's pretty clear that they're assuming that it's 20 and up, not 20 to 60. But there is a medrash that it is 20 to 60. But the Levites, they were counted from the age of 30 days and up. So why 30 days? So the Jewish people were counted from 20 and up because they're counting them, I mentioned, for the army. They're getting ready to enter the land of Canaan. They want to know how many soldiers they are. And soldiers would fight from 20 and up. And whereas the Leviim, they're not going to fight in the army. Their job is to do the service in the tabernacle. So they are not being counted from the age of 20. But the Levites would usually start their service at the age of 30, I believe. But they were counted from 30 days, many commentaries say, to show that the responsibility that every Levi has, every Levi has, they have such a strong responsibility. They're the holy tribe. Their responsibility to raise their children, properly, and even from the age of 30 days, which is the age that they're assumed that they're going to make it. Until 30 days, we don't know what's going to happen. Will the child make it? Will he not? From 30 days, if they made it to 30 days, we assume that they're going to make it to adulthood, or at least they made it through the neonatal period, and now they're assumed. So at that point, we're assumed that the Levium are expected to raise them properly, and there's nothing to worry about from that age. So once again, they're counted from the age of 30 days. And in verse 17, these are the sons of Levi by the names Gershon, Kas, and Merari, and then it goes through the different families and their countings. And once again, where they encamped around the Mishkan, around the tabernacle. And on page 743, skipping past that, verse 40, or I'll go a little before, verse 39, all the countings of the Levites which Moshe and Aaron counted by the word of Hashem according to their families, every male from 1 month of age and up were 22,000. There are 22,000 Levites, and like I said, that for the divine presence to rest in a group, there has to be 22,000. And there were 22,000 Levites. So in verse 40, Hashem said to Moshe, count every firstborn male of the children of Israel from 1 month of age and up, and take a census of their names. You shall take the Levites for me, I am Hashem. Sorry, did I back up? No, I'm good. Okay. So Moshe counted, in verse 42, Moshe counted as Hashem and commanded him, every firstborn of the children of Israel, every firstborn male according to the numbers of their names, from 1 month of age and up, according to their numbers, was 22,273. So they're 273 off. And then in verse 44, Hashem said to Moshe, take the Levites in place of every firstborn, meaning the firstborns were consecrated for the service of that the Levium would do. So Hashem told Moshe that you're making an even exchange, a Levi for a firstborn. So there are 22,000 firstborns who are becoming not holy. You have 22,000 Levites who are becoming holy. But there's a surplus. As it says in verse 46, as for the redemption of the 273 of the firstborns of the children of Israel, who are in excess of the Levites, you shall take 5 shekels each, according to the head count, and the sacred shekel shall you take. The shekel is 20 gera. You shall give the money to Aaron and his sons as redemptions of the additional ones. And those they did by lottery of which Levites would have to redeem themselves, as opposed to just being redeemed by a Levi. Which firstborns would have to redeem themselves, as opposed to just a Levi coming in their place. And nowadays, when we don't have the Levi firstborn exchange, because the Levis are already consecrated by virtue of their father being a Levi, being born from a Levi, so every firstborn, there's a mitzvah for every firstborn to be redeemed for these 5 silver coins. The commentaries mention, Rashi speaks this out, that if you look, I skipped over it, but if you look at the actual counting of the Levium, it says in verse 39, we read that there were 22,000. If you look at the counting, there actually were not 22,000. There were 22,300. And the Gemara says about this that when one of the Romans, I think, asked the rabbi, said that Moshe must be skimming off the top because there were really 300 more Levium, so all those 5 shekels really shouldn't have been given. Either he was bad at math or he was skimming off the top, and to which the Gemara answers that 300 of those Levium were also firstborns. So you can't exchange a firstborn Levi for a firstborn, because the firstborn Levi was a firstborn as well, and he was already consecrated by virtue of being a firstborn. So those 300 Levites cannot be included as part of the redeeming, as part of the exchange, because they were already holy. Okay, and then the Parsha ends on page 745. It talks about the jobs of each family of the Levium, and it begins with Kahas, that the work of Kahas was to carry the holy vessels of the Mishkan, the holy vessels of the tabernacle, and it says that they should cover them, that before they move them, they should cover them. And I saw in the Medrash, someone asked me in the past, I don't remember who, but someone asked me in the past that I mentioned that the Mizbeach, the altar, had to always have a fire burning. They had the Eish Tamid, an eternal fire. So they asked me, what about when they traveled? What did they do? And I saw this week that the Medrash actually said that they actually kept the fire burning while they traveled. They just put a metal vessel over it. And once again, miraculously, the fire didn't burn the altar underneath, which was made out of wood covered by copper. And it also didn't burn, that it stayed lit. In spite of that, it was a heavenly fire. So it stayed lit, and then that was covered by a cloth. Okay, and it ends on page 747, verse 17. Hashem spoke to Moshe and Aaron, saying, do not let the tribe of the Kahasite families be cut off from amongst the Levites. Once again, page 747, verse 19. Thus shall you do for them, so they shall live and not die when they approach the Holy of Holies. Aaron and his son shall come and assign them every man to his work and his burden. They shall not come and look as the holy is inserted, lest they die. What's that talking about? That these coverings of the altar and the holy vessels were very important, because like it says, if they're looking while it's inserted, they would die. That the altar was so sacred, and especially the Ark of the Covenant was so sacred that looking at it would cause, just if a person looked at it, that would be considered disrespectful and they would die. So I've mentioned before in this class that I think it's the Gemara says that every festival they would open the curtains of the Holy of Holies, and the Jewish people will all look at the ark and see the cover of the ark and see that the angels were facing each other, and which would show that the relationship between the Jewish people and God was in a healthy place. So how is it that they would open the covers of the ark and everyone would look inside, whereas here it's saying if the Levites would see it, they would die? And the answer to that given by the commentaries is that there's a difference when something's in its place and something's out of its place. That when, for example, you could, from an earthly king, let's say, when the king is in his throne room, he's sitting on the throne with his advisors around him and with the honor guard in front of him, then seeing the king isn't disrespectful. That's how the king is supposed to be presented. That when the king's in its place of honor, when something's in the place of honor, seeing it is not disrespectful. But when the king is traveling, when he's in the, when he's traveling, so then looking at him is disrespectful because he's not at his best. He's not at the place of honor. Usually someone's traveling, they're disheveled, they might be wearing their sweatpants and whatever. Then they'll get to wherever they're going, they'll get to the hotel, they'll shower, put on their suit, then they're ready to be presented. And to treat the Aron, the ark, with the proper respect, we want to treat it the same way we treat something respectful on earth, and in its proper place while it's in the Holy of Holies at the right time to open the curtains to look at the Aron is not disrespectful, but to see it while it's traveling is considered disrespectful. Okay, and that's how the Parsha ends. And then to the Haftarah, this week is, I believe, I didn't look at it, but Sunday is Rosh Chodesh, so this week has a special Haftarah. That's the Haftarah of Machar Chodesh, the Haftarah of the day preceding Rosh Chodesh. In the art scroll, it's on page 1207. And it discusses something that took place on the day before Rosh Chodesh. That is on page 1207 in the Stone Chumash. It states that Jonathan, Yonasan, said to David, tomorrow is a new moon, for you will be missed because your seat will be empty. And this was a time that David was in a very precarious position, that he was a servant of the king Shaul, but at the same time, he had already been anointed as the new king by the prophet Shmuel. And while Shaul might not have known about this, I'm not clear on that, but he felt threatened by David. David was very popular, and Shaul was paranoid at the time, and he was very threatened by David. And so Yonasan told David that I have to see how my father's feeling towards you. And they made up a signal that Shaul would say with his attendant, that the attendant wouldn't know. And it was, in verse 27, it states, it was the day after the new moon, the second day, and David's place was empty. Shaul said to Yonasan, his son, why did the son of Jesse, son of Yishai, David, not come to the feast yesterday or today? In verse 28, Yonasan answered Shaul, David asked me for permission to go to Beis Lechem. He said, please send me away, for we have a family feast in the city, etc. In verse 30, Shaul's anger flared against Yonasan, and he said to him, son of a pervertedly rebellious woman, do I not know that you prefer the son of Yishai for your own shame and the shame of your mother's nakedness? For all the days that the son of Yishai is alive on the earth, you and your kingdom will not be secure, and now send and bring him to me, for he is deserving of death. So Shaul revealed that he was ready to kill David. So Yonasan, who should be, he's the crown prince, and he should be threatened by David, that David was standing really in the way between him and the throne, but he went out and signaled David that Shaul was going to kill him if he comes back. And so he after the signal, it states in verse 41, the lad went and David, this is on page 1208, verse 41, and the lad went and David stood up from near the south side of the stone. He fell on his face to the ground and prostrated himself 3 times. They kissed one another, they wept with one another, and David wept greatly. And in verse 42, Yonasan said to David, go to peace. What the two of us have sworn in the name of Hashem, saying, Hashem shall be between me and you, and between my children and your children shall be forever. He's expressing that his love for David overcomes any family rivalry or any threat to the throne that David's existence threatens. Okay, shkech, everybody have a great Shabbos.
Nice.